Howdy gang, it's finally time to start talking again about Legends of Boxing 2. Can you believe it? It's been over 2 years since I've really been able to sit down and focus on this game. And there's a lot of pent-up energy, there's been a lot of feedback, especially after the computer game came out. And I'm looking forward to taking that pent-up energy and diving back into this game design, which was probably the first of my serious game designs, especially for sports games. So let's get into it. What are some things that are going to change in second edition? Well, I'll preface this by saying that Dice United and then Stone Cold and then Dice United 2, those games have all sort of evolved around each other, and all of that development really owes some of its DNA to this game. And so now, having done all of that development and taken all of that experience, I can now roll that back in and apply some of those lessons back into Legends of Boxing. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And the goal is going to be to make this game even smoother playing, faster, simpler, and more realistic, especially in terms of balancing how the ratings interact with each other. So what am I talking about? Actual things that I've changed this week and I've been experimenting with here in the alpha stage. And what I mean by that is that this is the stage where I'm just kind of woodshedding and experimenting and doing my own trials before I really share it with anybody. When we get to the beta stage, maybe whether a month or two down the road, then that's where I can bring in play testers and really start to get some feedback that way. But here's what I'm looking at. So the control procedure, it's been noted that control and defense are a little strong in first edition, and especially when you add those two together. So if you have your Ollie, your Robinson, Tunney, Jack Johnson, guys like that, who have highly rated in control and defense, they are a little overly tough, shall we say. So, and that has been to the detriment of some of the really strong brawlers, Tyson, Marciano, so forth. So we're going to try to balance that out. And since that is a game-wide trend, then that has really less to do with fighter ratings than it has to do with the model itself. So the model is going to get tweaked. The engine's going to get tweaked a little bit. So the control procedure is where I was headed. In LOB2, when both fighters are in control, then instead of trying to do the math to determine which one is over by more, looking at the separate control numbers and doing the subtraction and all that stuff, you don't have to do that anymore. When both fighters are in control, there is now a separate chart that I'm currently calling the exchange chart, split action exchange. And that means that both fighters in that 20-second segment have some element of control, and they can both typically accomplish something in the round. So the exchange chart's really neat because it's going to bring in some additional results. For example, in addition to your even exchange and your even flurry, it might refer to a fighter's ability to be tactical or physical. That could be a deciding factor in who wins an exchange. Power comes into play, where the more powerful, the higher rated power can win an exchange just by hitting harder. Extra grit can refer to a fighter's willpower at the moment. Let's see, durability can be used as a tiebreaker on here. I'm going to play some fights or conduct some fights with this in a future video, so you can see the stuff at work. And there are other references to power, like if a fighter has a power of 5 or more, then he can stun his opponent and win the exchange 3-1. and that automatically puts the opponent, in a stun condition for the next segment. So that's pretty neat. And that will give us some more, that'll make brawlers feel a bit more dangerous, I think, and appropriately so. So those are the examples of the kinds of things that are on that new exchange chart, which happens when both fighters have some control. When neither fighter has any control, doesn't have any control, then, like first edition, you can go to another split action chart. I'm calling it the open action chart, and that's where your headbutts, your foul checks, juke and move, that sort of stuff is still in that chart for this version of the game. So what else? Okay, the control ranges, and instead of the target numbers in that weird chart we had then, I was looking back at Dice United and Stone Cold, and we can do this sort of control approach for it there. So that'll be very familiar to those of you who already have those other two games. All right, what else? I'm trying to stay on point here. So K-checks reduced 2-point results and expanded the other ranges. So when you hit a K result and a fighter has the appropriate amount of power to turn that into a knockdown chance, then you're going to get less 2-point punches coming off of those chin checks or those K checks. And I think that's good too. There's enough 2-point results elsewhere, especially now, that it's good to have more 3- and 4-point results in there and kind of step up the drama a little bit and increase the brawler's chance, or the power puncher's chance of putting that other fighter at a disadvantage for a moment anyway. All right, 3-point punches. So on stuns now, stuns used to just give you automatic control for the very next segment. That's still the case. But in addition to that, for that stun segment, the fighter who is stunned, his defense is cut in half. So 4 and 3 becomes 2, 2 and 1 becomes 1. And that's just the way it is for that segment. And then if they survive that segment, no knockdown, nothing else, then when they get to the following segment after that, their defense bumps back up again and they've survived that little window of danger. What else? Will and cut checks now show a range to succeed instead of a target number. So in other words, I'm kind of getting away from target numbers. Some people found that confusing. The will and cut chart has not changed. It's just expressed differently in terms of ranges instead of target numbers. What else? Advanced mode adjustments are gone. I think most of you knew this was coming. I never really liked those. I shouldn't say never. I used them for a couple years early on after I was talked into it. And then after a amount of time, I'm like, this doesn't make the game more fun or necessarily even more realistic to me. So I kind of dropped them, but I kept them around as a footnote. I should say they were on the mode cards, but I don't know. I don't think they're necessary now, and that does make the game a lot easier to play, because as you are stepping round from round, you don't have to sit there and rethink. Okay, well, he had a knockdown or a stun, a stagger in this previous round, so that's going to affect the control number. And now this mode advances. This advanced mode adjustment affects that control number. Now his other mode is going to affect his, and the control numbers just start getting crazy. It's just not necessary. All right, what else? Mode cards. So on the mode cards, I've added K11 results. So there's just a few fighters, I think only 2 or 3 that I can think of, that have 11 power rated at 11. But now you'll see that it is on there on some of the mode cards. Is it on all of them? All 4? I think it is. Yeah, K11 now has a slot on all 4 mode cards. The mode cards have been changed subtly. Probably that's the most obvious change, is the adding of that K11. What else? Endurance costs. So endurance cost now is 2 points per round for any mode except pressure, which is now 3. So in the previous game, it was 3 points for inside, 4 points for pressure. That's no longer the case. Instead, we're going to end up getting more endurance attrition by way of TKO points. And speaking of TKO points, the TKO ratio, as had been for years and years, actually it's always kind of been this way, is 6-1. It was only when I did this edition of the game in, 2017, 18, that I decided to emphasize modern stoppages with that, with that scale that appeared on the charts. Turns out that's not really necessary either, and that's not really where most of us do our playing. Most of us are playing, are conducting fights, from the 80s, 70s, 60s, and so forth. And really, the modern stoppages don't apply then anyway. So 6-1 is going to be the default ratio. I think I'll probably keep the modern stoppage chart in an appendix as an optional rule of some sort for those who want it. So in other words, I'm kind of reversing my stance on that because it's kind of worked both ways. All right, so there we go. I'm just printing these out on black and white on paper and slipping them into these boards for now. This is how I'm going to do my testing. So enough rambling from me. But man, I'm excited, and this is going to work really well. And I think the fighter ratings, like the core 125 fighters, they're not going to change. The ratings aren't going to change as much as you might think once all of these core mechanical changes are in place, because they won't have to. All right. Well, I hope you're excited too, and I hope that all that rambling kind of gives you a sense of where we're going with LOB 2nd edition. And stay tuned. I plan to bring out Tommy McBride. I've got his little paper card here. I was doing a career campaign with this guy a couple of years ago, and really enjoying it. And obviously other projects took me in other directions, and now is a fun time for me, a good time to get back into it and get reacquainted with that campaign, with the campaign guide, and test out the changes in LOB2. So hey, thanks for watching. Stay tuned, more videos coming.